On nights when Becky was kept busy too long to join Sarah in her room, the attic seemed even more desolate. When the fog hung heavy, there was no light at all to be had, and Sarah was forced to beg a candle from cook in order to see it all. Even that comfort could be snatched from her at a moment when cold draughts raced and rattled through the empty spaces. Sarah lay in her starless black, unable to sleep, unable to move. There seemed no hope to be found. Definitely set a happiness tone for this episode. It can only go up, can't it? I think Becky was right, Emily. Even Emily could not be seen in the gloom. Sarah closed her eyes. I shall die here. You're probably not going to die here. I can't bear this. I'm cold, I'm wet, I'm starving to death. Look, how you're thinking of Becky is no interest of mine. I've walked 1,000 miles today. Well, walk 1,000 more. I've heard the song. And they have done nothing but scold me from morning until night. Cook keeps punishing me for not being fast enough. I've had no supper again. I've tried to pretend that I have, but... You aren't listening, are you, Emily? I told Becky we were just the same, but all that means is that neither one of us is a princess. Maybe there aren't any princesses, not anywhere, and we only dreamed that there were. There are probably princesses. That's just how a monarchy worked back in these times. This is all there is, work and pain and being hungry forever and always. Sarah lay there with her eyes closed and her body trembling, and she could not remember the moment when, at last, she fell asleep. Yep, that is how sleep works. She's got this nailed down, I see. Not long ago, Sarah Crewe had been a beautiful child, but lack of food does no good to anyone, unless to a girl still in course of growing. She was constantly cold and hungry and tired, and the stress and pain of it gave her face a pinched expression. Maybe I lied when I said this episode was going to get happier. Jesus. Now and then, some kind-hearted person passing her in the street glanced at her with sudden sympathy, but she did not notice. She hurried on, trying to make her mind think of something else. She fought to suppose and pretend, even as the muddy water squelched through her broken shoes. Well, no wonder, you're standing in the road. Suppose I had dry clothes on, suppose I had good shoes and a long thick coat and wool stockings and a whole umbrella. A whole one, not half. A whole umbrella. And suppose just that when I was near a baker's where they sold hot buns, I should find sixpence which belonged to nobody. And suppose that I should go into the shop and buy 6 of the hottest buns and eat them all up without stopping. Some very odd things happen in the world sometimes. She had to cross the street just when she was saying this to herself. The mud was dreadful, and she almost had to wade. Wade through mud! And this is the day of horses as well, so it's not only mud. There's going to be mixed some, Oh god, the smell's going to be rather alluring when we come back, isn't it? She picked her way as she carefully could, looking down at her feet to choose her steps. Just as she reached the pavement, she saw something shining in the gutter. It was actually a piece of silver, a tiny piece trodden upon by many feet. Not quite a sixpence, but the next thing to it, a 4-penny pence. Piece. I don't know what that is. And 1 second it was in her cold little hand. Oh, it's true, it is true, it is like magic. She looked up at the shops facing her. There, not a few steps away, was a baker's shop, and a cheerful woman with rosy cheeks was putting into a window tray a delicious new baked buns. You better fucking say something, Becky. It was almost made Sarah feel faint for a few seconds. The shock, the sight of the buns, the delightful odours of warm bread floating up through the baker's cellar window. She knew she need not hesitate to use the little piece of money. It had evidently been lying in the mud for some time, quite forgotten by its owner in the stream of people passing by. I think if you say I've got sixpence, whose is it? A lot of people are going to take credit. And yet it did not seem quite right. It was like magic, and magic in all her fairy stories always came with a test. It was then that Sarah caught sight of the child. There were beggar children all over London, and when Sarah had been wealthy, she saw them often and gave them pennies when she could. In her more recent suffering, she had rarely had time to notice these others. This was a little figure who was not much more than a bundle of rags which small, bare, red, muddy feet popped out because the rags with which their owner was trying to cover them were not long enough. Above the rags appeared a shock head of tangled hair, a dirty face with big, hollow, hungry eyes. Sarah knew they were hungry eyes the moment they saw them, and she felt a sudden sympathy. Are we really going to give it away? This isn't how being a... We're so screwed. The eyes were watching her. They expected nothing more than to be passed by, as always. And yet Sarah felt compelled to approach the owner of those eyes and speak. Are you hungry? Does she look like... whatever. Ain't I just... I'd no idea what sort of accent I was supposed to be putting on that. We're going just even more cockney, aren't we? Her voice was hoarse and raspy with the cold. Oh, okay. So like this. And Sarah could understand her perfectly. When was the last time you ate? Dunno. Never got nothing today, nowhere. I've asked and asked, no dinner, not yet, no breakfast, not yet, no supper, no nothing. You'd never tell how I'm doing this voice. What do you mean a webcam? Just to look at her made Sarah more hungry and faint. If I'm a princess then, when they were poor and driven from their thrones, they always shared with the populace. If they met one poorer and hungry than themselves, they always shared. This is one of the populace. Clutching her silver coin, Sarah went into the warmth of the baker's shop and ordered 4 currant buns, that were 1 for a penny. The baker was a good-natured woman, and seeing such a cold and hungry child in front of her, slipped 6 buns into the paper bag, insisting that the extra 2 were only for make-weight. Sarah made her thanks and hurried from the shop as to not get in the way of more important customers. The hot buns, even in their bag, warmed her hands. The beggar girl still huddled up in the corner of the step. We better fucking tell her name to that Indian kid. She looked frightful in her wet and dirty rags and stared straight in front of her with a glazed look of suffering. Sarah took out one of the buns and with a pang set it on the child's lap. See, this is nice and hot. Eat it and you will not feel so hungry. The child started and stared up at her, as if such sudden amazing good luck almost frightened her. Then she snatched up the bun and began to cram it into her mouth with great wolfish bites. Sarah took out 2 more buns and set them down. 3 and 3, that was an even share. The sound of the child's hoarse, ravenous voice nearly choking in delight as she gobbled her food was awful. She is hungrier than I am. I have a place to sleep and Miss Minchin feeds me sometimes. Like, don't get me wrong, this bigger child does have it bad, but we also still have it bad, you know? Just because someone has it worse doesn't mean that your situation is perfect. Oh, whatever. But her hand trembled as she set down the 4th bun. That left Sarah with 2, 1 bun for each hand to keep them warm. She is starving, I am not starving. She put down the 5th bun and turned away. The little London savage was too busy devouring to give any thanks, even if she had ever been taught politeness, which she had not. Sarah found some comfort in her remaining bun, at all events. It was very hot, and it was better than nothing. As she walked along, she broke off small pieces and ate them slowly to make them last longer. Suppose it was a magic bun, and a few bites were as much as a whole dinner. I should be overeating if I took more than 1. That is the way that magic works. It gives you just enough. I don't need anything more. It gives you just enough? It gave fucking Cinderella, like, a carriage and an entrance to the ball. I think magic is sort of needing to surpass human expectations. That's why it's called, oh, I don't know, magic! When the weather was bad, Sarah and the other servants were especially busy making sure that mud and ice did not invade the entrance hall. While she scraped and toiled, many events took place around London of which she had no knowledge. A kindly baker, moved by seeing a cold and hungry child give away most of her buns to one even less fortunate than herself, offered to take the beggar child in. A large family of children, once glimpsed in their Sunday carriage, laughed over their father's letters and promises to bring them pictures of Muzhiks, oh Jesus, and Droshkis when he returned from Moscow. Ah, please don't hate me if you're Russian and I pronounce that wrong. And in Miss Minchin's attic, someone stealthily opened the skylight from the outside. He let himself down through the aperture with such lightness and dexterity that he made only the slightest sound, but that was enough to frighten a curious rat back into his hiding hole. So, I mean, this seems bad, doesn't it? This seems terrible. Forgive me, I do not come to do harm to your mistress. Few would waste politeness on a rat or consider it to be a pet, but this man knew that Sarah was not as other children. He had watched her in secret, seen how she made friends of all the little things around her. The rats, the sparrows, even the sky, she greeted as if it could hear her. By the mistress of the house, she is treated like a pariah, but she has the bearing of a child who should be of the blood of kings. First, he went to the narrow bed. He pressed his hand upon the mattress, then lifted the covering and examined the one thin pillow. To the rusty fireplace, then, examining the grate which had not seen a fire in many days. The old table, the tattered footstool, Emily's chair, each was carefully tested and set back as it had been. This is... At least leave a note. This is... I don't know. Sarah's probably going to come back up and realise that something's been changed. At last, he took to the walls. From his pocket, he carefully withdrew a number of small, sharp nails. Without the aid of a hammer, he pressed them once at a time to the crumbling plaster. He looked around, nodded, then pulled himself up to the skylight and withdrew as swiftly and silently as entered, leaving no sign. Doesn't inspire confidence, but, you know, at least he's well-meaning, I guess. Sarah sat on her bed, clutching at her shoulder. She had felt something inside of it stretch and pull in a way that muscles shouldn't earlier that day, and now every time she moved that arm too suddenly, the sharp pain interfered. It either means you've dislocated it or you've pulled a muscle. Worse yet, you could have even, broken your shoulder. Let's just not think about it. Maybe she's completely fine. Maybe magic will occur. Maybe. Maybe not. There's nothing broken. It's only sore. If I have time to rest, I'm sure it'll be all right. If I had a few days to rest and a warm bed and a good meal, and if my papa were here... We're going to be a very fucking sad child when we come to the, realization in a year that, indeed, our papa isn't here. But I can't have any of those things again, ever again. She looked over at Emily's serene, dull face and managed a faint smile. I'll just have to be thankful for what I do have, isn't that right? There's you and there's Becky, and as long as I have my little kingdom to defend, I'm still a princess. And that's what makes a princess, not being beautiful or owing heaps of jewels or getting your own way. A princess protects her people. She looks around at her little kingdom, the cold grate, the cracked wall and his family of rats, the window where sometimes she could see the birds gather. If I were a fairy princess, I would summon up birds and have them weave a beautiful ball gown for Becky. And I would turn the rats into fine white horses to draw her carriage, just like Cinderella. We could spend Christmas riding around London in a magical carriage and scattering largesse to the orphans and the workhouse girls. It was a lovely, warm imagining, and it kept Sarah quite distracted for some time, picturing the lights of the carriage and the sounds of the wheels and the hooves over cobblestone roads. There, in an instant, she sat bolt upright. Another sound had intruded her consciousness. Is it a rat or is it the fucking monkey again? It was not on the slates of the roof, but from the stairs below. It was Miss Minchin's voice, and she was angry. Oh, Jesus Christ. Hide everything we've ever owned. She is scolding Becky. She is making her cry. Miss Minchin was almost never willing to exert herself and climb the last flight of stairs. Only when she had some vicious purposes, when she had come to accuse Sarah of theft. And that was as petty, to be fair. That was wanting a reason to have a go at us. But now she was angry enough to be coming at least part of the way up, and it sounded as if she were driving Becky before her. You impudent, dishonest child! Cook tells me that she had missed things repeatedly. 'Twa'n't me, Mum. I was hungry enough, but weren't me, never. You deserve to be sent to prison, picking and stealing half a meat pie, and sent to prison for the theft of half a meat pie. I mean... it's not exactly fucking heinous, is it? 'Twa'n't me. I could have ate a hole and I never laid a finger on it. Sarah cringed at the sound of a distant slap and her body bumping into the wall. Don't tell falsehoods. She wouldn't. Sarah stood in the middle of her room in the darkness. She was clenching her little teeth and opening and shutting fiercely her outstretched hands. Now go to your room at this instant. Sarah heard Becky run into her slipshod shoes up the stairs and into her attic. She heard her door shut, and knew that she threw herself upon her bed to cry into her pillow. I could have ate two of them and never took a bite. 'Twas cook that gave it to her policeman. It was too much. Sarah could no longer stand still and bear it. Are we really going to go out and... Oh, Jesus, this isn't going to end well. Sarah, but... This is a dark filter over a light room. These lights are on. Whatever. She burst out of the room and tore down the stairs, barely able to keep her balance to face Miss Minchin. You wicked, cruel thing! Cook takes things for herself and then says Becky steals them. She doesn't! She doesn't! Do you dare to criticize your betters? You are no one's betters. It is you who are the thieves. Cook and you both. You stole Becky's wages and you knew how little she had and you stole it anyway. Becky nearly died trying to save your cat just to please you and you never thank her for anything. And she's so hungry sometimes that she eats crusts out of the ash barrel. Such impudence. Well, it is only to be expected. She's fucking acting rather calm to this, isn't she? With a sinking heart, Sarah realised that her righteous tirade had failed to thaw Miss Minchin's heart at all. If anything, it had hardened it. She had lost her temper, abandoning the composure which had given her the strength throughout her trials, and now her enemy was smiling. I have been too lenient with you girls in light of your youth. Clearly more discipline is required. You will go to your room, Sarah, and you will stay there. Neither you or Becky will have anything to eat tonight, or tomorrow either. Perhaps that will make some impression upon you. We're going to need to start stealing. Being angry only acknowledges her power over us. And so Sarah squeezed her hands into fists, but did not raise them. She only spoke in a voice that was slightly trembling. Yes, ma'am. Now, Sarah. Yes, ma'am. She turned step by step into the darkness alone. She climbed the attic stairs. You just lost, like, lunch and dinner for both Becky and... Yeah, well done. Your action has effects on others, you know. She turned step by step in the... Yeah. There was no friendly voice waiting for her in her room, only the soft echo of Becky's sobs. I can't protect anyone. She reached for her pillow, then bit her lip as pain flared inside her shoulder. I'm useless. Carefully, she lay her thin body down upon the bed. I'm not a princess at all. Sarah did not know how long she slept that night, but she had been tired enough to sleep deeply and profoundly, too deeply and soundly to be disturbed by anything. When she awoke at last, it was slowly and sleepily, as one who is not quite sure where the boundaries lie between waking and dreaming. She felt warm, comfortable, perhaps even too warm. Dreaming it is! And that, of course, she could not believe. The attic was never so warm and cozy except in her most beautiful supposings. What a nice dream. I don't want to wake up. Unless the Indian kid has sort of come in and left us with stuff. That would be... it'd be something. But even though she kept her eyes closed tightly, she could not stay asleep. Something in the room was forcing her to awaken. It was a sense of light and a sound. The sound of a crackling, roaring little fire. What could it be? Do these look like Indian sheets and covers? Possibly. Oh, I haven't awakened. I am dreaming yet. She sat up, resting her elbow, and her breathing came fast. It isn't melting away. I've never had such a dream before. She scarcely dared to stir, but at last she pushed the bedclothes aside and put her feet on the floor. I can smell it. I can smell the fire and food. It feels real, but it can't be. It's bewitched, or I'm bewitched, and I only think I see it all. But if I can only keep on thinking it, I don't care. She sprang up, touched the table, the dishes, the rug. She went to the bed and touched the blanket. She took up the soft, wadded dressing gown and suddenly clutched it to her breast and held it to her cheek. It's warm, it's soft, it's real, it must be. She almost staggered to the books and opened the one which lay upon the top. Something was written on the flyleaf, to the girl in the attic from a friend. So it has to be. It is the Indian kid. Oh, our life's turning around. This is what giving buns to kids in streets entails. I didn't believe, but now I do. I still don't. Now I do. It's just so beautiful. Look, it's tears coming down my face. It's definitely not the sweat from it being nearly 40 degrees Celsius. When she saw that, she put her face down upon the book just for a moment and burst into tears. Someone cared. In a moment, she collected her wits and ran to the attic door to signal her companion. Becky, wake up, come and see. Miss? Becky stared around the room, her eyes moving from one item to another, growing larger with every movement. The soft slippers, the fire, the books around and around her gaze went until she looked quite dizzy with it all. Oh, miss, how can it be? I don't know. Maybe it was magic after all, the magic that won't ever quite let the worst things happen. Have you Whatever. She removed the covers from the dishes on the table. Look, Becky, muffins, still warm. If it's magic, miss, then do you think it could melt away? Hadn't we better enjoy it quick? And she picked up a muffin and crammed as much as she could into her mouth all at once. Stop, you'll make yourself sick. Maybe we only do have this for a moment, but if that's so, we should enjoy it the best that we can. And that means eating slowly enough that we can taste it. They sat before the blazing fire and ate the warm, nourishing food, and they could not help looking at each other in a kind of joyous wonder. The sleepy comfort which at length almost overpowered them was a heavenly thing. It was not a drowsiness of happy, well-fed childhood. And they sat in the fire's glow and luxuriated in it. I thought it said it wasn't, and I had to reread that again. Reckon we'd better go down to do the work, miss, unless the magic has gone and made Miss Minchin disappear too. I suppose you're right. We wouldn't want her to come up here looking for us now. That's just not going to happen. Although, if it does happen, that means we wouldn't have any sheets anymore, so maybe not. I don't know if this will all still be here when we get back. Maybe it was only lent for us for one day, because we needed it so badly. If it ain't here in the evening, miss, it's been here since this morning anyways, and I shan't never forget it. She looked at each particular thing and pointed to them in turn, as if to record them in her memory. The fire was there, and the table was before it, and the lamp was there, and with the light rosy red. And there was satin on your bed, and there was soup and sandwiches and muffins there was. Together, still wrapped in the warmth of their secret, Becky and Sarah walked down the narrow attic stairs and back to their lives of drudgery. Miss Minchin's still there, I take it. Yet Sarah could not help but be changed by the experience. She walked into the schoolroom with a springing step, colour in her cheeks and a smile hovering about the corners of her mouth. Her high spirits were quite astonishing to see, especially to one who had expected her to be humbled and weakened. What is the meaning of this? You do not look as if you realise that you are in disgrace. You not absolutely hardened. I beg your pardon, Miss Minchin. I know that I am in disgrace. This is what gets to her. This is what gets to her. Be good enough and not forget it and look as if you had come into a fortune. It is an impertinence. And remember that you are not to have no food today. Yes, Miss Minchin. If the magic had not saved me just in time, how horrible would it have been? It's not magic. It somewhat fucking discredits everything the Indian boy has done, you know? Ah, whatever. More pain. The gifts in the attic had not disappeared. In fact, they had increased. There's actually more stuff. Wow. We have books. Like all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. Wow. That first night, Becky and Sarah had returned to the attic to find the table set once more, now with cups and plates for both of them. A new supper in a vase with fresh flowers on the mantelpiece. Alright, well, I don't see the vase, but, whatever. After that, there seemed no pattern to it, but every day or so, some new comfort or wonder would materialise when no one was watching. The ugly walls were covered with pictures and draperies. I didn't see any pictures. Books were stacked into place. The remains of old meals were cleared away and new food left in its place. It is exactly like something fairy come true. Is this my garret? Am I the same cold, ragged, damp Sarah? And to think I used to pretend and wish there were fairies. I feel as if I might be a fairy myself and able to turn things into anything else. I feel as if I might wish for anything. Diamonds or bags of gold, and they would appear. Well, let's not push it, I think there's a difference between sheets, food, and warmth, and diamonds, One is necessities, one is sort of... You're splashing out a bit too much, aren't you? As best as she could manage, she split her bounty with Becky. The furnishings were difficult for a little girl to move unheard on her own, and the books were of no interest to her friends. But other things could be shared. A new mattress had appeared, and so Sarah's old thin one was moved and stacked atop Becky's, along with half of the new blankets and pillows, and Becky proclaimed it the most comfortable sleep she'd ever had. Ever. I think that's memory playing havoc. But where does this all come from, miss? Who does it? Isn't it more beautiful not to know? No, of course it's not. You need to give credit, It sort of undermines the efforts of one if you just put it down to magic. It's just that. Becky pointed to the pink and white lilies on the vase, whose petals erupted outward like a joyous shout. I remember you telling stories about heaven, miss, and the fields of lilies. Do you think it's the angels come to help us? No, probably not. It's the Indian kid. 'Cause if it is, miss, I think I'd better get back to church right quick, say my thanks. That's a nice thing to do, whether it's angels or fairies or something else. But let us not try too hard to solve the riddle. If it is fairies, they might disappear if we try to catch them. Elsewhere, others were still unaware of the magic, but not blind to its effects. Sarah Cruel looks quite unusual lately. Absolutely fattening, I'd say. Don't know how she's done it, considering. Don't be ridiculous. She has always had plenty to eat. I have provided for her out of my own generosity. Wow, she genuinely believes it too. As you say, ma'am. There is something very disagreeable in seeing that sort of thing in a child of her age. It might almost be called defiance. Can't wait for it all to be taken away from us, then. I heard a story among the girls once about that Sarah and her saying that it might happen to people find out she really were a princess. Rubbish, don't talk nonsense. I don't know why I'm speaking to you anyway. Get back to your work. Yes, ma'am. Not taken away from us yet? Not taken away from us yet. This is a good thing. At the beginning of the next week, a man knocked on the door of Miss Minchin's school. When Sarah was sent to answer it, she found no one there, only a selection of parcels. She laid the 2 largest parcels on the hall table and was looking at the address when Miss Minchin came down the stairs and saw her. Take the things to the young lady to whom they belong. Don't stand there staring at them. They belong to me. To you? What are you talking about? Oh, this is the quickest way to get all of your shit confiscated. This is really stupid. I don't know where they came from, but they are addressed to the little girl in the right-hand attic. That is where I sleep. Becky hasn't the other one. Open them at once. Sarah did as she was commanded. Inside the packages was pretty and comfortable clothing, dresses, shoes, stockings, and gloves. I was about to say gloves. And gloves and a beautiful coat. There was even a nice hat and an umbrella. They were all good and expensive things, and on the pocket of the coat was pinned a paper on which were written the words, "To be worn every day, will be replaced by others when necessary." Miss Minchin was quite agitated. "Sarah, dear, is it possible that you do have living relatives in this country, an uncle or cousin, or your father's perhaps?" "No one I've ever known. Papa never told me anything about family in England." "Well, someone is very kind to you. Can't wait for them to be taken away." Sarah could not know what thoughts were racing behind Miss Minchin's eyes, but the change in her voice was clear. "As the things have been sent and you are to have new ones when they are worn out, you may as well go and put them on and look responsible. After you are dressed, you may come downstairs and learn your lessons in the schoolroom. You need not go out on any more errands today." Might you be a student? Oh, so superficial, isn't she? So lovely and superficial. It doesn't seem real. Oh my god, we get to do all of this stuff again. Do we take one of... Oh, we can't take one of all, we're spoiled. Yeah, tutoring? Fuck you little kids. We're rich again, bitches. You ain't ever getting help in your life again.